that right? What? What's that?
The Porsche 928 is actually more likely to develop issues from being parked for years than actually being driven daily. As a matter of fact, you'll get in more trouble from keeping this car in storage long term than actually driving it hard down the mountains. How can this be? Well, remember that this car is overbuilt. It's meant to take whatever you give at it.
Like one of them tigers from India.
Since these cars have been in storage for so long now, a lot of parts stop working randomly when they're in storage. For example, I had both of my windows go on a 928 that I had in storage just from sitting. Luckily, that's a cheap fix. I've also heard of the brake calipers seizing. This also happens to the Porsche 944, 911, and 968. You keep them in storage too long and then parts just seize up, especially if the storage has humidity. For example, most storages in Florida, like a garage, are not temperature controlled. You'll have humidity in the garage, and after several years of the car being in storage, you'll have issues pop up. But as far as delicate, no way. You could be banging on the red line on a 928 GT all the way from Miami to California with no issues whatsoever, except for the gas. That couldn't be further from the truth. And it's funny because at the time when the Porsche 928 came out, it was labeled as a very big sports car. But today when you see it in traffic, it looks like a tiny car. It fits 2 full-grown adults on the inside and normal kids in the back. And you have a huge trunk. You wouldn't know that by seeing this car in traffic today. So if you're over 6 feet tall, this is the car for you. And if you want to track it, pick one without a sunroof and the helmet comfortably fits. So yes, small on the outside, but big on the inside. I understand that movies like Scarface in Miami probably added to that stereotype, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. The Porsche 928 is mainly owned by people who appreciate good engineering. The people that owned it would probably own it regardless of the badge or regardless if it's a Porsche or not. They're just attracted to the engineering of this car. That's actually the main attraction point of this car, the way that it's built versus what you would see in mainstream culture about this car. So even though the type of image of this car does persist, the reality is that it's a lot of cool guys, a lot of dads, and as a matter of fact, my kids love to ride in a good Porsche 928. At safe speeds, of course. On to the next one. It is the price of this car, but it should be seen as the entry point of this car to a subscription service. Like all Ferraris and all Porsches of the time, these are high maintenance cars. So when you purchase the car, you can easily spend another huge chunk of cash just maintaining it properly. You don't see that when you see this advertised price. This was understood at the time. When you purchase these cars, you just would expect Ferrari level maintenance expenses. Luckily, the Porsche 928 is less expensive to maintain than an air-cooled 911, except for gas. You're going to be spending a lot on gas in these cars. They love to drink.
That was awesome.
Most people do not know what this car is. They can sort of tell that it's a Porsche, but that's it. Since Porsche sold so few of these cars, few people knew what these cars were when they were new, and even more so now. At first, it feels like it's a little bit counterintuitive because you think to yourself, well, there's so much information on this car. There's actually more resources on this car now than when this car was new. The critical factor is that you don't see these cars on the road anymore. You don't see them in traffic anymore. For example, Miami used to be flooded with Porsche 928s. Now I can go 3 months without seeing a single Porsche 928. So the actual result is that most people have never seen one. So if you think you're going to be rolling down the street and everybody's going to be like, whoa, Porsche 928, you might get that at Cars and Coffee and around Porsche enthusiasts that know these cars. But in reality, people know less about these cars today than even when these cars were new. Nope, these cars are most definitely not hard to work on. What is hard is to find somebody to work on them. Most shops, when they see this car, guess what? They haven't seen one in a long time, and most workers there haven't actually worked on one. So what happens is that they don't want to go ahead and learn on the car because of the liability. So very few shops remain that will actually work on this car. You really have to go ahead and comb your entire area searching for a shop, not that just will work on it, but that has experience working on Porsche 928s. So if you're looking to purchase one of these cars, I would say first things first, find somebody around your area that knows how to work on these cars. The last thing you want is a mechanic learning to work on a Porsche 928 with your car. That's not good. Now, this applies for people that do not touch the cars and they want somebody else to go ahead and work on them. If you want to work on them yourself, there is countless how-tos on this car and how to do every single little thing on this car. It is incredible. That being said, if you guys know reliable shops that specialize on Porsche 928s, drop it in the comments. I will pin it to the top so others can see the resources. Nope. As a matter of fact, most of the early Porsche 928s were stick shift. Porsche didn't really start flooding the market with automatics on these cars until the early 80s. A lot of 78, 79, 80s cars that I see for sale are mostly stick shift. So they are most definitely not all automatic. And I like to add that the stick shift are driven almost like an automatic because you are skipping gears with that car. There is no need to run through every single one of the gears on that car. Since the engine has so much power, it's so flexible, you're literally starting in second gear. So you're not really going through all the gears in the stick shift unless you're driving in the mountains or there's no cops around. And I want to add that the automatics are great. Once adjusted, the downshifts and the throttle response is instantaneous. So if your automatic feels a little bit slow, a little bit lagging, that automatic needs to be tuned and it completely transforms the car into a beast with instantaneous throttle response. Nope, this is a parts car and it needs to so that others could live. I've seen countless people try to restore 928s on deals that they got, and after years and years of restoring them because they got a cheap entry price, their results are still not good. Don't be that guy. Understand that the Porsche 928 was a super expensive car, brand new, and to restore them is far more expensive to restore than a 911, a 944, and even a Ferrari. Get the nicest one possible and stay away from parts cars like this. Unless you need the parts, then that's a different story. This one is true and false because of where the Porsche 928 was in the depreciation curve. For a lot of years, the recommended maintenance on these cars were not performed because it was cost prohibitive relative to the actual selling price of the car. That means that a lot of upkeep and maintenance items on these cars were not done. You're not going to spend $15,000 in maintenance on a car that costs $10,000. And that was the case for many years on these cars. Now, the value of these cars has skyrocketed. People are looking what's on the market, and this theme, this story continues that a lot of what's on the market, even though it's expensive, is gonna need a lot of money to bring it up to date. And that's true, but it means different things to different people. When you think deferred maintenance, you think that something terrible happened to the car. Realistically, most cars that have deferred maintenance can be completely brought up to date and ready to daily drive. If the car never overheated, the timing belt didn't go, or has thrust bearing issues, so realistically, most of the cars that are driving need maintenance, but the deferred maintenance is not catastrophic. It's a lot easier to do the deferred maintenance on a Porsche 928 than to do a restoration job. You bring most Porsche 928s up to date and they are a daily driving joy. Until the next one.